As I've said, an, an absolute honor to be able to be here speaking with you today. The Asper family has played a huge part, not only in Winnipeg, but in the entire broadcast industry. You guys are legendary. Your father founded CanWest Global, and he left you with some pretty big shoes to fill. Uh, at first, you'd think that would be tough, but you've managed to do it all.
Well, we're trying.
You really are. I mean, to begin with the Asper Foundation, uh, can you explain to my viewers a little bit about what it is that you guys do in Winnipeg?
Well, sure. First of all, thank you very much for wanting to talk a little bit about our various projects and the foundation and the family, and for your kind words about the family. My dad, really believed that he was so blessed to live in Canada and that he had a responsibility to give back. So because he did very well with CanWest Global Communications, he made sure that he took some of the funds that the company was making and distributed it annually. So CanWest was a big supporter of the performing arts. We really believed in investing in artists. Society can't survive without music and theater and storytelling and dance, and also literacy, programs that support family reading programs. That was something he did with the company, but he also took money out of the company and wanted to leave a permanent legacy. He said, at the end of the day, you don't want to just have taken up space in this world. You want to leave the world a better place than the way you found it. And he passed those values on to my brother David and my brother Leonard and me. So he created this permanent fund, the Asper Foundation. And he said, you don't eat the fund is the tree. You just, give out the fruit of the tree. So every year we give out income from the Asper Foundation. And he wanted it based in Manitoba because he really said, I got my start in Manitoba and I want to make sure that Manitoba flourishes. So we've done a fair number of things with University of Manitoba, University of Winnipeg, St. Boniface Hospital. But of course, the really big project was the Canadian Museum for Human Rights.
And I have to ask, where did that whole idea come from? The reaching for the stars, where does that even spark from?
You know what, I can tell you, I'm a corporate and commercial lawyer by training. So I practiced law for 5 years in Halifax, and then I came back to join my dad at CanWest because, doing corporate and commercial law made sense to work with him and his amazing company, and the opportunity to work with my dad was too good to pass up. But he really never forgot, again, how lucky he was to live in a country where he could wear his identity freely and in peace. And he came from Russia, where there was persecution, and his parents came from Russia. He was born in Minnedosa, Manitoba. So he said, what he was worried about is that Canadian kids don't know their own history. And he said, Canadian kids don't know that Aboriginal people in this country, in Canada, didn't have the vote until the 60s. 1960s, Aboriginal people were not full citizens. Women didn't always have the vote. There was incredible discrimination. And he said, Canadians take their rights for granted. But if you don't know how rights come to be and how rights can disappear, you can lose them. And for him, the founding principle of the whole 9 yards of living, in his opinion, were tied up in your human rights. So it was very simple. He said, let's do a trip. Let's do a trip where we can take grade 9 students, 15-year-olds. Teachers told us that 15-year-olds are looking for moral clarity. They're looking for what is right and what is wrong, and they want to do the right thing. And so he said, let's create a trip that takes Canadian kids to Washington, and they'll be exposed to a whole bunch of different museums in Washington that focus on freedom. One of the main ones is the Holocaust Museum, because really when you learn about the Holocaust, you learn is that it was often the bystanders that didn't do anything that allowed the Holocaust to happen. So the point of the trip was to teach kids, you can't be complacent. You have to learn to stand up for human rights, speak out, and everybody has to take personal responsibility for advancing human rights. So these kids go to Washington, and that's the first stage, was that we have been taking grade 9 students to Washington since about 1999.
And that's exactly what the Asper Foundation is doing. It's standing up, it's speaking out, letting people know that you're here and you're here to help and be who you are. That's a huge message to get across, and you guys managed to do it. But how do you do it so well?
Well, if it didn't resonate with people, it couldn't happen. I mean, if we couldn't believe how many students, how many teachers want to be part of this trip to Washington. Great social studies teachers are saying this dovetails with exactly what we're teaching. Students are facing bullying, they're facing homophobia, they're cyberbullying, and we need to eliminate that from their lives by inspiring the bystanders to become human rights heroes. So this grade 9 trip was very successful, and all that happened was really, we just suddenly had this epiphany saying, why are we taking Canadian students for an American experience? They should have a Canadian experience. They should learn about our laws and our Charter of Rights and what a great country and our heroes. And we found out there's no place in Canada where you can do that. We thought it might be in Ottawa, but it's not in Ottawa. So my dad's suggestion was, let's start up a museum, a center, where we'll chronicle Canada's human rights journey, warts and all, and inspire young people especially to be proud of their country and to want to be great citizens, to vote, to be involved, to be active, and to stand up to advance rights, not only in Canada, but around the world. So but again, that was Dad's idea. He dropped dead of a heart attack in 2003. If it hadn't been for Canadians from coast to coast, if it hadn't been for the City of Winnipeg government, the province of Manitoba, and most of all, the federal government saying, yeah, we believe in this cause, let's make it a national museum. If it hadn't been for them, there would be no Canadian Museum for Human Rights.
And I have to ask, with a devastation like that, losing your father, which I'm so sorry, how do you decide to continue? How do you not just give up?
That's a really good point, because honestly, we could have decided right then and there, back in 2003 when Dad died. He was the guy that knew the prime ministers. He was the guy that knew all the millionaires and billionaires who could put the private sector money in. We didn't have that capacity. But he taught us that it's not a failure to try and fail. It's a failure to not even try. So you know what? We said, I remember talking to him in the hospital when we saw his body, and we were saying our goodbyes to him, and I said, Dad, we're going to try. That's what you taught us. And being from Winnipeg, Winnipeggers are tough. Working for my dad, you kind of had to be tough. He was critical and tough to work with, but he taught us to overcome adversity and keep being, perseverant and trying. So we said, we'll give it a try. You know what? If we fail, we fail. And my brothers, David and Leonard, they are the trustees of the Asper Foundation with me, and I'm the president, and all together, working together, they said, if we're making progress, we're going to keep on trying. If we stop making progress, we'll stop. So honestly, every single day when a donor would come in, and they might be somebody writing a check for $30, saying, I believe so much in what you're doing, thank you so much, that would keep us going. And then you get people like you who are here today in LA to be a part of this celebration, John and Bonnie Bueller. 2 incredible Winnipeg citizens who committed, right after Dad died, they committed to donate $6 million to the museum. And that's exactly, wow. I just started crying my eyes out when they said they wanted to do that, because it was a message to us that we're on the right track.
You are doing the right thing.
Yeah. And of course, John's from a Mennonite background, and of course the Mennonite community in Canada came to Canada seeking freedom from persecution. They totally got what the point of this museum is all about. So we've just, we didn't set out to start building a museum. We just were doing this trip to Washington, and we thought we'd take kids to Ottawa or something. So we never dreamed we were going to be 10 years down the line building this kind of crazy idea.
And look what it turned into, and it's even better that it's in the center of Canada.
Yeah.
People don't get that. People hear Winnipeg, they think, mosquitoes and snow. They don't think it's the center of Canada, and it wants to be heard.
Well, actually, the location is highly relevant for 2 reasons. First of all, because we're in the center, if you're doing a national student travel program, which is what we're doing, we'll be funding students from coast to coast to come to Winnipeg. So whether you're in Vancouver or whether you're in Truro, Nova Scotia, we're central, and we'll be bringing these grade 9 students, and they'll be billeted with Winnipeg students. So it'll also be a kind of Canadian unity, get to know your country thing. But second of all, Winnipeg has an incredibly strong and highly relevant human rights background. The site is at the forks of the mighty Red and the beautiful Assiniboine River. It was a 6,000-year-old meeting ground for Aboriginal people, a peaceful meeting ground. So it's already got a kind of good aura, a good vibe about it. We're on Treaty 1 land, and so that's important. because Aboriginal rights in Canada and Aboriginal rights around the world are very relevant, and they'll be highly present in this museum. It separates St. Boniface, which is the largest French language community outside of Quebec. So we've got French language rights and French cultural rights covered in the museum, and the museum overlooks St. Boniface. Louis Riel is buried, 200 yards away from where this museum is, and Louis Riel is, a huge Canadian hero for Métis rights. Labor rights. Manitoba was the home of the 1919 general strike. We went on strike for 6 weeks. The entire city shut down, fighting for better workers' rights. And it was a catalyst across Canada for more fair labor rights. So labor, French language, Aboriginal rights, Métis rights, and most importantly for me as a woman, we were the first province to give women the vote. We're the first place that women were voting. So for women's rights, Nellie McClung was our hero. She was, a Winnipegger who fought for women's rights.
And they don't teach that in schools.
No, and I grew up not knowing any of that. But also, across Canada, we've got some other human rights heroes we'll be profiling, like Viola Desmond. Probably never heard of her. You've probably heard of Rosa Parks. Yeah. Right, Rosa Parks, Black civil rights movement in the States. Well, Viola, 10 years before Rosa wouldn't sit at the back of the bus, Viola was a black woman in Nova Scotia who refused to sit in the balcony of a theater, and she was arrested and jailed for 30 days. And the media got on board and fought to get her out, and that sparked the end of the discriminatory laws against black people in Canada, thanks to Viola Desmond. And last year, for the first time, this was in the 40s, the government of Nova Scotia pardoned her for her arrest. So
for the first time?
For the first time, so yes. And actually in Vancouver, Flu Hog Shoes, I don't know if you know Flu Hog Shoes, if you FLUEHOG, they have a Viola Desmond shoe that they've created out of Vancouver. So check it out.
Oh, neat.
Yeah, it's a really cute little 1940s shoe. Very, very cool.
We'll have to look at it.
Viola Desmond.
Now I have to ask, the way the building looks, the way it's come together, the reaching for the stars, the roots of the building. How does that come to be? Who do you go to say, this is what I want, can you make it happen?
Well, first of all, my dad was not an airy-fairy sort of entrepreneur. He did everything with a huge amount of research. So we involved Western economic diversification, the province, the city, and the Asper Foundation in a major due diligence business plan study to say, what would it cost to do this kind of museum? What does it have to look like? What's it got to be there? And the reports came back saying, this museum will be a success if it is iconic architecture, because you're in Winnipeg, which is not well known for its tourism. It's hard to get to. So you've got to make this a really compelling architectural experience, number one. And number two, your content has to be original and unusual and something that you don't see in other parts of Canada. It's got to be very compelling content-wise. So what my dad was best for was, he didn't know how to start up a television network. He was a lawyer, corporate and commercial lawyer like me. He just knew you don't have to know all the answers. You have to know the questions, and you have to hire the very best. So we did Canada's largest architectural competition and selected Antoine Predock from Albuquerque, New Mexico, who will be here at the event tonight, with this amazing design, this crazy, stupendous architectural design. We had 60, several hundred submissions, 60 real submissions, 8 amazing finalists, and we chose Antoine Predock's design, and I am so glad we did, because it is truly gorgeous. But for the content, we had to get the very best, and the very best guy doing idea museum work is a guy by the name of Ralph Applebaum and Associates out of New York. Ralph has done the Clinton Presidential Library. He's done the Holocaust Museum in Washington, the Museum in Washington about freedom of the press. He's currently working on the new African American History Museum in Washington. He's done countless museums around the world. So we retained Ralph to do the content. And Ralph swears that no matter how great the building is, he swears that we are going to be blown away by his content. He believes in having dynamic programming. He also believes in incorporating the arts. He wants theater and dance and music, because they've always been part of human rights movements, if you think about it. So I feel very comfortable that we've hired outstanding, great people. And of course, the federal government made it possible by saying we'll make it a national museum. We will cover the operating costs. So the feds cover the operating costs like they cover all national museum operating costs.
That's huge.
Without that, there would be no museum. Stephen Harper had a really big vision. He really believed in investing in the West. So this is the first national museum ever to be outside of Ottawa. And I believe there'll be more to come. Actually, Pier 21, the Immigration Museum in Nova Scotia, has now become a national museum. So we've set a trend for national institutions, cultural institutions leaving Ottawa. I believe in a good, strong Ottawa, but I also believe that creating jobs and everything around the country is good. So that was something that he believed in. But he also really believed that, Canadians also do need to respect the fact that we live in a blessed country with democracy and a free media and so on. And he believes in celebrating that. So once we had the operating costs secured, it was just a matter of raising all the well, not all the capital, but $150 million in capital that the private sector has been raising.
That's amazing. And you're still going tonight. And I know there's a singer who I'll be speaking with later who actually is donating all of his proceeds from a specific song I'll talk about later to the museum, which is great. I want to congratulate you guys. You're doing a wonderful job, and I can't wait to go to the museum.
Should we talk about the star pin for 1 second?
Yeah, I'd love to.
I should just explain, this again goes to your point about reaching for the stars.
Yeah.
That was Dad's mantra. It's on his gravesite. Whatever you do, strive for excellence. Like, he was very concerned that Canadians have a tendency to always just reach for the middle, reach for mediocrity. And he said, the last thing he said to me, with this museum, we're reaching for the stars. It is not worth doing any other way because I got better things to do with my life. So he left us with this oh my God, we got to reach for the stars. So that's why the star has become our mantra, to reach for the stars and also to be a human rights star. And remember that anybody, no matter how old or young or whoever you are, can be a human rights star.
And now if people donate, they get a star. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. And we want people to wear their star pins proudly. We want to finish this campaign because the next thing we want to do is raise money to subsidize students to get to Winnipeg because, traveling in schools is expensive. So we don't want funding to travel here to be a barrier to coming to experience this.
Great. And the last thing, one of the most important things, when can we officially get in that museum and see everything you've done?
We are opening September 20th, 2014. We have an opening date after so many years. It's going to be an absolutely stupendous opening, and I cannot wait. It'll be here before we know it.
I can't wait. I'm really looking forward to seeing it. Thank you so much for speaking with me.
My pleasure. Thank you very, very much.
Anytime.